Hello, hello. Today I'm once more returning to another iteration of the Huang, or, well, the Huang Meh, as I've kind of affectionately started calling it. The matchmaking is, of course, tier 8, and sadly, I kind of feel like you have to have an example of tier 8 matchmaking when you make a commentary of any of these upcoming tier 6 premiums, because one of the major downsides of any tier 6 ship in the game right now is just how often you end up being up-tiered. It's really one of the fundamental issues I have with any tier 6 premium in the game. Well, it affects all tier 6 ships, of course, but considering you pay real money for the tier 6 premiums, you kind of have to make an example of this kind of situation. The Huang He is incredibly squishy. 24.1k health, which is insanely low for a tier 6 cruiser. I mean, if it was a DD, it would be pretty tanky, but it's a cruiser, it's very thinly armored, and it still has 11k less health than a Cleveland, for example. So this thing is squishy. It brings a whole new meaning to the word squishy, in fact. It also has, as you can see, an insanely slow turret traverse still. They buffed the turret traverse, but I don't think they buffed it enough. It still has a 25.7 second turret traverse, which doesn't make sense considering it's actually a very well handling cruiser. It actually has a good turn radius and a good rudder shift, but the turret traverse is completely abysmal on it still in comparison. It also only has 3 turrets with 2 guns each, so a total of 6 guns, with the back turret having a pretty awkward firing angle. And it has a 7-second reload. This reload was buffed from 7.5 to 7. Now, those that watch my previous commentary I highlighted that I would love to see a significant buff be made to this reload, so that it would actually at least have somewhat competitive DPM, considering it already has so many other downsides, like the terrible turret traverse and the lack of health, the lack of armor in general. So in order to compensate, perhaps give it some really competitive DPM. But Wargaming did not want this, and they gave it a very small incremental buff. Now you might notice my hero hasn't seen the enemy bombers, and he's against Ranger, so I can already tell it's a strike Ranger, and no doubt there's a strike coming in on my hero. I'm hoping he will notice it and pull back his fighters, but I don't think he's going to. So I'm kind of starting to sail south now to see if I can possibly intercept the strike and maybe help him in some way. But it's maybe a bit late to react like that. Now, another thing you'll probably notice is the fact that I'm actually running the Torpedo Reload Booster, aka the Torpedo Reload Consumable, which is, of course, usually reserved only for DDs. Well, I'm running it here to test it, to see if I can maybe find a situation to make it work. But the weird thing here is that your concealment is 8.1 with full concealment, that's with Captain and Camo, and your torpedo range is actually 8. So you can't really stealth fire. You can kind of stealth fire as you're sailing away from someone, but the opportunity to stealth fire doesn't really exist. There's the strike, as predicted, and he's not really pulling back his fighters, so our carrier is in huge trouble. But as I was saying, and another problem is that in order to slot this torpedo reload, you have to give up your hydro. So you're giving up one brawling tool for another, which is, in my opinion, a bit of a wonky design. The one strength that this ship does have, though, is the AA. That's still just as strong as it was in the past, and of course I choose to augment that strength by speccing the AA range module and speccing for AFT, and you can see with defensive AA active, I'm at least able to punish these planes that went for our hero quite heavily, and you can see how quickly they're melting. These are tier 7 Ranger planes, and I'm at tier 6, so obviously it's very, very effective against killing planes still. That hasn't changed. But the whole plane killing aspect also kind of highlights the problems I have with the design. In order to be able to shoot down planes effectively, you kind of have to get spotted by the enemy planes. So you give up your concealment in order to shoot down the planes, and you kind of don't want to give up your concealment because that's pretty much the only survivability you have. So there's a bit of a why give it excellent concealment and excellent anti-air. It's not fun for the carrier either, because he gets a very limited amount of counterplay, because the only times he spots me is when he's already flying into my anti-air. So you end up in a situation that isn't particularly fun for the player it's himself or herself, because every time you shoot down planes, you become extremely vulnerable. And for the carrier, he might just fly into your AA without even knowing it, and he can only pull back after he's already starting to take damage and lose planes. So the whole stealth AA thing is something I don't really support too much. It's something I hate in high tier games against Minotaurs as well. You just randomly start losing planes without even seeing the ship, and it's not fun for the carrier. There's no counterplay. You just start losing planes, and that's when you pull back like, oh crap. And usually it's too late by then. You have already lost a significant chunk of strike force. Now, our hero does die, with his fighters AFK idling in the middle of the map. He didn't pull back the fighter once to save him, which is of course extremely questionable play. But then again, carrier play has not exactly been high as of late. Well, it's never been that high, but Wargaming has kind of made carrier play even worse by removing manual drops from lower tier. Instead of, for example, tuning them down in order to balance seal clubbing, they decided to remove them entirely. And this, of course, means that the average player doesn't actually learn any sort of manual drop skills at low tiers at all, and most of the time they go completely unaware of them throughout the game, because there's no tutorials either. Now, the DPM itself, I am running IFHE. The guns are 152mm, so you kind of have to run IFHE to make it work somewhat. But even then, we're talking about 6 guns. And, I mean, the Cleveland has 12. Ships like the Budionni has 9. And all of these also have significantly better range. So why is the Torturer so bad? Why is the DPM so bad when the gun amount is already so damn low? I don't get it. Like, the Cleveland literally has twice as many guns as you do. So why are they so, well, why are they so afraid of giving the ship any sort of firepower? It's already so squishy. And this game I try to play extremely safe, extremely passive, which in a way is kind of going against the whole design. I mean, I feel like my biggest problem with the Huang is I do not understand its intended design. First of all, great stealth and torpedoes and torpedo booster, these are all things that would recommend brawling. I mean, recommend pushing in. You want to go in, you want to get close. You got great concealment to get close, you got torpedoes, you got torpedo boosters. These are all things that would recommend close range brawling in some manner. But then on the other hand, you got completely paper armor. You can get Citadel from pretty much any angle whatsoever. In fact, your Citadel deck armor is 9mm, which means that you can literally get overmatched by Anshan AP shells. 130mm is more than enough to overmatch something that squishy. So that opportunity goes out the window. Also, you have to replace Hydro in order to get the torpedo reload. So you're giving up one brawling tool to get another. And you're so squishy. Your turret traverse is awful. 25.7 second turret traverse. In comparison, ships like La Galissonière or the other French premium, De Grasse, they have 15-second turret traverse. And this one with less guns, less DPM, has a much worse turret traverse. So it's contradiction after contradiction. It seems to be, they seem to not really know exactly what they want this ship to be. And it's just as confusing for me as a player trying to figure it out. As best as I can understand, the best way to have some sort of success in this ship is you need to queue up with a carrier, because AA is such a huge part of this ship. So if you don't end up getting a carrier, you pretty much lose 90% of your effectiveness in the game. Second of all, you kind of want to sit behind islands in cover because you're so squishy, but you don't have the range to actually deal damage to too many targets unless they push into you, like these guys are doing. So it's like, I don't understand the role. And if you want to sit behind islands and so forth, you don't really have those great Cleveland arcs that you can lob over islands. As you can see there, I just hit the island if I try to hide behind islands. It doesn't work on this ship. And you don't have the range to properly harass from any good positions either. It's a series of contradictions. It's like Wargaming doesn't know what they want to do. They want to make a brawler, but they don't give it tankiness, HP pool to be able to survive the brawl. And they want you to go in with the torps, but they don't give you turret traverse to be actually use your guns against DDs and such. And if you the torpedo reload, which is cute, is replacing the Hydro, and considering you kind of want to be in close combat in this thing, well, you pretty much only have close combat as an option once again because the range is only 13.2 km. So you have to give up your Hydro in order to be able to brawl, or in order to be able to use the Torpedo Booster, which makes the Torpedo Booster extremely questionable in value. It's such a series of contradictions. Like, I really would like to know what is Wargaming's plan for this ship. Overall, why do they think that the ship needs to only have 24k health? That's also something that baffles me. It doesn't have enough firepower in terms of AA, in terms of gunpowder, in order to justify it being so squishy. I don't understand it. Like, all the competition has 30k or more. Why does this one need to have 24k? What sort of magic power is it that this ship has that justifies lowering the health pool so drastically? And I have no idea what it is. I legit have no idea what this reason is that they feel like they need to lower it, because this ship still isn't a threat. I still don't consider this ship a threat. If I see one in the open shooting me, I will shoot pretty much everything before I shoot this guy. 6 guns with 7-second reload. I mean, even with IFHE, there's still only 152mm guns. The AP isn't going to do anything with even slight angling, and even if you give broadside, it was stocking 6 guns every 7 seconds. It's pitiful damage in every single way. And when you do finally aim at him, I mean, he can't angle. This thing has no armor. The nose practically starts from that first smokestack all the way to the bow. That's pretty much all nose armor, and it can be overmatched by any battleship with complete ease. Even the lower caliber battleships overmatch it easily. So you can't really even angle in this thing, because all the enemy needs to do is point and click, and you take massive damage. And because you don't have range, you're automatically so very close to the enemy that you end up taking huge hits. So what exactly is the value of this ship? What is the point? I still don't understand the point of this ship. That's something I've been so trying to figure out. I figured out the playstyle, which is what you're basically seeing here. You play extremely safe, and you try to make this pitiful firepower work. This extremely sad, underwhelming firepower. You try to make it work from behind some island, I get extremely lucky with the RNG getting 2 fires, but he of course damage cons, and then he starts sailing away. And when he starts sailing away and your range is 13.2, you don't have spotter plane, you don't have anything, I can't keep shooting him. I have to switch targets. He's literally gonna leave my range, and there's nothing I can do about it. And if I was a Cleveland, I could be doing so much more. As a Cleveland, I could be shooting down just as many planes as I am now, but I would also be a massive gun threat to everything. I could just constantly be harassing all these targets I see in front of me. I could be shooting right now. And this ship neither has the arcs to lob the shells over the island the same way, nor does it have anywhere near the firepower either. And of course, if I do want to go in YOLO, it doesn't have the health either. It's a series of contradictions that make no real sense to me. I'm gonna see if I can maybe set this Tirpitz. He's got a broken engine, so maybe getting a fire on him. But like, this is a full broadside I'm shooting at him, and look how it looks like someone. It looks like any other cruiser, like a Cleveland or Budionni, shot his front turrets. But this is the full broadside. I even have to give a lot of broadside and able to be used. You see how bad the firing angles are. You have to give this much broadside in order to be able to use the back guns. If you don't, well, you're losing out a third on your DPS. And even here, like, the volume of fire is so small that DDs are not necessarily that easy to kill. The shell velocity is good, but when the volume of fire is so small and you count in dispersion and how small the targets is, it's not that easy to deal that much damage to cruisers or DDs at long range. So I chose this game because this is, in my opinion, the style of play you have to utilize in the ship to have any sort of success in it, and that is a very slow, a very methodical, a very passive play style where you in general try to play safe. You only really let yourself get detected when you have opportunities to get away with it. But even here it's, for example, a bit risky. I pop out to harass this Tirpitz, but he's about to eat Tirpitz and he's used his repair, so high chance of him dying. But every time I play this ship, I'm wishing I was playing another tier 6 cruiser. Even the Nuremberg after the buffs is, in my opinion, a far superior one. It has insane DPM. with the built-in IFHE that the German HE has. It has great range. It also has great torpedoes. So it's vulnerable, yes, but so is this thing. I mean, why would you play this thing? Let alone, why would you pay to play this thing? That's what I'm trying to justify here. It's one thing playing it. If it would be a free silver ship, I'm notoriously less critical against silver ships than I am against premium ships, because when we're talking about the premium ship, I have to try to justify to my viewers why they should pay in order to play this ship. And with this Huang, I can't think of a single reason why I would recommend for my viewers to pay to play this. If you want an anti-air ship, you can play the Cleveland and be a huge damage threat as well. Or if you want a fun AA ship, you can play the Atlanta, and then you have radar and a huge damage threat as well. But this thing, you have like AA and you have no real damage. You have these torps that the torps aren't bad. It's just that getting to use them, you really need people charging into you, and even then it's iffy at best. And you can't tank anyone. You can't fight any other tier 6 cruiser will absolutely annihilate this guy in a 1 versus 1. I cannot see in any way winning against another cruiser, unless the enemy cruiser heavily misplays. But the problem is the enemy cruiser can literally turn around, give full broadside and start kiting you, and you do not have enough firepower to punish that full broadside. Because if you want to shoot him with your back guns, well, then you have to give... Look at this broadside. Look how much I have to turn to shoot that back gun. Still not enough, still not enough. Hey, now we're giving enough broadside. So, and if you try to go nose in, well, you're going nose in with 4 guns. And that's literally, that gives you the firepower of a destroyer. So it's not like any other cruiser is going to be particularly afraid of turning around in front of you, because there's no threat. That's really the fundamental issue of this ship, is that it's still no goddamn threat. And that's why all the previous complaints I had about this ship, the weird design, like the contradictory design, the feel of the devs not really knowing what the hell they actually want the role of this ship to be, and the fact that it's not a threat, are still very relevant. It's not a damage threat, and it's not a tanky ship either. It has nothing really going for it. For example, the lander, yes, the lander only has 8 guns, but then in return the lander has smoke, and it's incredibly tanky, because it has heal as well, which is a rarity at these tiers. And it also has great concealment, and it's also a huge threat to any DDs. If I want to support my DDs, at tier 6, I'd rather play a lander. If I want to shoot down planes, I'd much rather play a Cleveland. If I just want any sort of long-range damage, or I could play De Grasse, La Glacinière, Budionni. Like, these are all great ships, but this thing isn't a great ship. It's weak. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a reason to ever justify anyone paying for this ship, and I can't, because not only is it fundamentally weak, it's not fun to play either while being fundamentally weak. Like, even the Atlanta, before all the buffs, I considered it a fairly weak ship, but at least it was hilarious to play because of the sheer volume of fire you could throw out and the playstyle in general. But this thing is neither particularly fun to play or particularly good at anything besides anti-air. It's got great anti-air, but as I said, that's not unique in any way. And it's such a niche to have great anti-air these days, especially since the carrier population is steadily declining, and I don't really see why did we need another AA ship at tier 6. Like, was there some sort of trouble at tier 6 that we needed more anti-air? I honestly don't get it. The game does end because I had a very good game for this ship. I consider this a very good game. You're never going to have huge damage numbers unless people literally charge into your torps one by one by one. But I consider it a good game because A, I survived, 2, it was tier 10, and I shut down a bunch of planes and got some kills. In fact, looking at the team score, we can see I did manage to top the scoreboard with 2k XP. And take it from me, even when topping the scoreboard, I did not particularly enjoy this game. I had to work so hard, put in so much effort to do things that I could have done so much easier in any other tier 6 silver ship. And that's really the fundamental issue. I feel like I have to put in twice the effort to get the same result, and even then I'm not really having fun getting that same result because I'm continually frustrated by the limitations of my own ship. So the Huang is, in my opinion, still not worth the money at all. Not worth the money in my books at all. Looking at detailed report, those 3 torps was half my damage. Those 3 torps were half the damage I did. The AP, might as well not even mention those 4 shells. The HE, 74 hits, 24k. That's pretty a classic low caliber HE, but usually you have 2 or 3 times the volume of shells, but with 6 guns and 7-second reload, you're not gonna have any sort of volume of shells. Anyway, this was my complainy vid about how basically none of the issues I had with this ship have in any way been addressed. It's still not a damage threat. It still doesn't have the survivability to actually be a brawler. I still don't understand what the hell the role of this ship is supposed to be. I don't know, maybe someone can enlighten me about what their great plan is, because I do not understand it. I know how to play it, but I don't think it's a particularly fun ship to play. Anyway, that was all from me. I hope you enjoyed this not very positive review of, or well, preview of the Huang. Gotta keep in mind this is a work in progress and subject to change, blah 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 blah. This is iteration 2. Iteration 1 was somehow even worse, but this one is still far from being a recommended ship.